Today, I am joined on the Start Scale Succeed podcast with Katie Ramsingh, the fashion copywriter with over 10 years experience creating copy and tone of voice for B2C and B2B brands such as Louis Vuitton, John Lewis, Farfetch, and many more. We're going to be chatting about Katie's top tips for creating copy and your tone of voice and why it is important. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yes, and very good to meet you. Copy, tone of voice is so important with connecting with your customers and really presenting your brand in a way that shows it to its best light and helps you make that sale. But before we get into it, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what it is that you do?
Sure. So, like you said, I have been a fashion copywriter for over 10 years. So, I started out in house and then I've done agency work. And then the majority of my career, I've been freelance. So, I help fashion and beauty brands with all things words. So, that's everything from tone of voice to product descriptions, email marketing, social captions, SEO blogs, and everything in between.
So, Katie, just to start us off, for people that don't know essentially what tone of voice is, can you explain what it is and why it's important?
Sure. So the tone of voice is how you communicate with your customers. So a tone of voice could be friendly, it could be aspirational if you're a luxury fashion brand. It's really, how you communicate your message to your customers.
And how do you then define that? How can you identify what your tone of voice is and set that tone of voice? What are the things that you would be looking at?
So I think you need to look at your overall marketing strategy and see where your brand sits. So are you aspirational? Are you trying to be educational and teach them about a new category? Are you a disruptor? If so, you maybe want to take a more cheeky tone of voice because you're kind of like showing that you're different from the traditional options. So really think about your overall marketing strategy, and that should kind of guide you towards the sort of tone you should be taking.
And when you're working with brands, how do you identify what that tone of voice is? Like, where do you start with them on that?
So usually they will come with an idea of what they think it should be, or they'll come with examples from competitors, but it might not end up being exactly that. So we'll take a look at the target customer, but then we'll also look at what kind of media they're actually consuming, what kind of brands they're interacting with, and really think about how they want to be spoken to. We'll look, if it's a brand that's already launched, we tend to look at reviews or social comments to see how people are interacting with the brand and what kind of language they're using, because that's usually a good indicator of what kind of tone you should be taking.
And what's the difference then between brand voice and tone of voice?
So I would say the easiest way to describe it is brand voice is usually like the personality of your brand. So your brand could be educational, or it could be inspirational, or it could be entertaining. But then the tone of voice is how your brand communicates that personality to the audience. So for example, you could have a educational brand voice, but your tone could be informal. So you could be teaching them about a new category, but in a really down to earth way using colloquial language and jokes. Or you could have an educational brand voice, but with a formal tone. So then you're using very proper sentences, you're using very maybe like longer, more expertise vocabulary to establish yourself with a formal tone.
So kind of like Duolingo, they're an educational brand,
Yes, exactly.
but their copy and their way of communicating is very fun, and it's quite fun and informal.
Yeah.
What are the guidelines then in terms of for creating that tone of voice? If you can go into a little bit more about that, whether it's you're refining your tone of voice or you're starting out, what's your checklist to go through?
Sure. So, like I said, you've got to look at your target customer and think about how they want to be spoken to. I would also always suggest trying to start building out like a kind of bank of keywords that your customer uses to either describe you or just uses in everyday language. So then you can make sure you're kind of mirroring back what they want from a brand. So yeah, like I said, look at social media captions, look at reviews, look at your competitors' websites, and think about how they describe clothes, and try and start to build together kind of like a word bank of things that you think could be useful to help building your tone. I would also think about kind of like a banned word list. So kind of like words that you would never use or associate with your brand. So, for example, if you're trying to be a luxury shoe brand, you're maybe not going to use words like fab or glam because it's a bit old-fashioned or not really aspirational, but you might want to use words like handcrafted or supple to describe the leathers. Then I would think about, where does your tone of voice fit? So are you going to be, you've got your brand voice hopefully figured out from your marketing, and then how do you want to implement that brand voice with the tone? So is it going to be informal? Is it going to be cheerful, sarcastic? And then when you've got that, it should all start to come together slowly.
And I think it's, and you mentioned there in terms of, looking at competitors and looking at reviews. I also find, I think Reddit is a great place
Yes,
to
I
look
love
at.
Reddit.
Yeah, it's so good. And for people that, are starting out particularly, it's great to go on. If you put in, I remember I was working with a client, and she was creating a brand for tall women, so clothing for tall women, and I would just put in that into Reddit, tall fashion for tall women, and it just came up with a whole load of forums and conversations and problems, and like you say, the language that people were using and the problems that they were having with not being able to find clothing for their height.
It's so useful. I was working with a Gen Z fashion brand, and she had a line of dresses. And when I was tasked with making the product descriptions, I thought, let me just look through some of the social comments. And so many people had asked on this one particular dress, can you wear it with a bra? So obviously we made sure to include that in the product description, and then she got a lot more sales because people realised, they could wear it without a bra. But it's not something she ever thought of as a designer. But yeah, it's definitely can be super useful.
Where are there other places for you to find inspiration to create a voice? You talked about competitors, talked about Reddit reviews. Is there anywhere else that you would look to?
I always encourage my clients to look absolutely everywhere. And in particular, I always ask them to bring at least one example that they like that is from outside of their category. So I think you have to look far and wide. So like I've mentioned, innocent smoothies. A lot of people might want to say like apple. It could be absolutely anything. It could be a billboard that you've seen from Tesco that was really funny, and then you've got to think like, why did I resonate with that, or what drew me to that? But yeah, and then it could be anything. When I was younger, I used to be obsessed with reading like shampoo bottles and stuff while I was in the bath, and like the bubble bath brand Matey is one that always stuck out to me, and it's just because it had a very conversational and relatable tone, which obviously I liked when I was younger. But yeah, definitely search far and wide. Any sort of written word you see anywhere, even if it's on the back of a drinks bottle, can be inspiration.
And in terms of when you're looking at your competitors, obviously you want to be different to them. Is there a way to identify the gaps or to use them as inspiration, but without being the same?
Sure. So I would always say, do competitor analysis and then highlight what you think they do well and what you think they're maybe missing the mark on. And then I'd basically create a third column, which is like, what do you have that differentiates you from them? So, for example, you might really like a bag brand, and you also have a bag brand, and they have a really relatable tone, and they talk about relatable scenarios about how you can wear their accessories, and you really like that and you want to capture that for your own business. But obviously you can't just replicate that exactly because it's not going to work. There's no point of difference. But if you're a small business and you handcraft all the bags yourself, then can we maybe use your tone of voice and speak in the first person and kind of bring in your personal experiences into the product description? So not only are people getting a relatable scenario of where they can wear the bag, but they're also connecting with you on a personal level, because that will be the USP that comes through.
And then if you're already an established brand and you never, that you might have been training for maybe 2 years or so, but you never did this work and you're feeling that your copy is falling a little bit flat, what would you do to help redefine that tone of voice?
So I think the tone of voice process, a lot of people do come to me asking for tone of voice when they are a couple of years into the business, which is totally fine because obviously there's so many things going on when you're launching. It kind of gets lost in the marketing haze. But if you're looking to come at it again, I know I keep talking about the ideal customer, but just go back there and feel like, where is the disconnect in what I'm communicating and who my customer actually is? How can I talk to them in a better way? So do the exercises that I previously mentioned, and then you can even ask them, like if you're an established business, maybe send out an email and say like, what would you like to receive from us? Do you like the way we speak to you? And then you can build it from there.
I know that you touched on a lot of the demographic side of things in terms of their age, what they do, economic side of things, but those real, the pain points or the solutions, like what is the reason that they're buying your product? What problem does it solve for you? How are they feeling when they're about to make that purchase in terms of why did they reach out for you in the first place? So if we go back to the tall fashion side of things, there was a frustration, there's a real need, there's maybe not feeling feminine because they can't find the clothes that work. You know what I mean? So it's about bringing all that in as well, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot. I know the word community is kind of thrown around a lot, and I'm sure everyone's probably sick of talking about it, but especially with smaller businesses, the founder or like the main reason behind the brand is really what draws people into it. So that's kind of like your magic formula, and as much as you can communicate that as possible, I think is the key really to success.
A lot of people are using AI now in lots of different ways in their business. How are you using AI with clients?
Clients use AI with me is more, I'd say, than I use AI with clients. So clients will and are now delivering me much better briefs, because rather than saying, I want this headline to be zingy or it needs to be more fashiony, they can kind of put that feedback into ChatGPT and it can kind of come up with a more of a solid brief. So it can help a copywriter to know exactly what a client needs more. And also it's good for like ideation. So I'd say I'd never use AI to implement your copy, but if you're trying to come up with ideas, you can just ask it, what are some ways that I could market tall fashion to women in a relatable way, and then think about the kind of examples it brings up, and then have a go at writing copy based on that.
It's more like a brainstorming side of things. What about do's and don'ts when you're creating your tone of voice and your copy?
So with tone of voice, I would say do look at all aspects of the business. So, okay, you've decided that I'm a single founder, I make crochet baby clothes. So I'm going to be super relatable and talk in the first person and be really informal and just chat to my customers like friends and just call them babe. And that's what's going to really draw my customers to me. That's great. And I would say that's a really great marketing tactic for social and for email. But I would say if somebody has a customer complaint, or if your brand grows and you've got a customer service team, that's maybe not the kind of tone that you want to be using. So I think about how your tone stretches across all aspects of your business. And so a big do would be do look at all areas and adjust your tone appropriately. And then for a don't, I would say don't copy directly from a competitor. Lots of people come to me and they say, I really love Reformation's tone of voice, for example. So the US sustainable fashion brand. But you cannot just implement that and expect it to work if you're making posters in Liverpool out of like recycled plastic. It's not going to be the same. You have to do your own independent tone of voice research and kind of invest that time. You can't just copy and paste something and expect it to work for you.
Lots of people come to you maybe when they're a few months in, or you might be a few years in, and they know that there's something missing, they need to redefine it. From a investment point of view, when would you suggest to people to invest in copy and tone of voice with a professional?
In an ideal world, and I do have clients that come to me pre-launch, but before you launch is the best time to get tone of voice sorted, because it is the solid foundation for all your communications going forward. So it will be, your whole website, all your emails, any sort of tag if you've got it on clothes, the leaflets that go in the packaging. So ideally we want to get it done before launch. And also I think people find along the way it helps them to establish other things. So maybe they want to have a fashion brand and they think, okay, this is my tone of voice. But then they get further down the development line and they realize, oh, okay, my retail price is going to be this. We maybe need to change the tone to reflect that. So it's good to do it as early as possible, I would say.
If you were looking at a budget point of view, is there a priority of investment of that cost. So if you had a limited budget and you were starting, where would you allocate that budget for tone of voice first? Would you be like, right, okay, I'll have it on the website copy, or I'll put it in my product descriptions, or, how would you split it? If you were a brand founder, product business?
I would invest in a tone of voice package that can also do implementation. So I would like to work with someone who could help me build out the brand voice and tone of voice. But then also, I think it's key that you're not just left with a big PDF of information and then you've got even more work to do, because then you're going to need to actually write all your own website copy. So someone that can do the kind of research stuff with you, but then also have it so you've got the homepage, you've got the about page, you've got the product descriptions, because they're the key things that you're going to need for launch. And then other things like email and social, if you've got the editorial guidelines, you can kind of bootstrap and do yourself until you can afford to invest in another member of the team, I think.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more on copy. I know we talked about tone of voice, but what are your guidelines and top tips for people, either when they're creating copy themselves, or they might be working with someone to do the copy, but what should they be aware of or keep in mind?
Sure. So I am a very big fan of making sure, and any copywriter you work with, or if you're doing it yourself, you need to be mindful of SEO, so search engine optimization, because even if you've worked with a really creative copywriter and you've got really what you think is a really fab tone of voice, if it's not search engine optimized, it's not going to matter, because no one is going to be able to find it or see it unless you're investing a lot in social or other elements to get them to the website. So search engine optimization is a big one. Invest in keyword research, or do keyword research yourself, and make sure that those are seeded into your copy. So they should be seeded into the website homepage, the about page, but also product descriptions. My second tip would be to make sure that your website is also AI optimized, which is a big thing that's coming in now. So if you're doing SEO blogs, or if you're doing any sort of like long form content pieces, make sure that they are optimized for AI as well. So that's slightly different to SEO, but you can find stuff online regarding that. But it's just about making sure that things are written in a way that customers would type into the search bar to find it. So a lot of questions, a lot of phrases like, where can I find the best tall clothes for women? Rather than phrasing it in a way that might sound more editorial and fashiony. How are people actually searching for the things related to your category, and write like that, basically.
How do you keep that interesting though? Because what we put into AI, it can be as simple as, the best tall fashion brands, or where do I find XYZ? But that as a headline or a catchy headline, it's not. Do you know what I mean? So how do you stand out in the, for an AI search?
I think actually that's a good point. So when you say the best tall fashion brands, I don't think anyone actually searches the phrase the best tall fashion brands. I think they might be like, where can I find clothes that fit me? Or 6 foot, where can I find clothes that fit me? So I think we can say the titles can be more interesting, and I think you'll find that they will lead towards being more interesting. But also that there is also a skill in that comes with hiring a copywriter, because it's definitely a fine balance between, you don't just want to be super like packed with information.
Basic.
But yeah, that is a skill.
And the keyword research, where are the best places to find that?
So I would suggest working with someone that can do that for you, and they'd usually just deliver like an Excel spreadsheet that can give you your top keywords. Or if you're a bit more techie, you can use tools like SEMrush. But yeah, you can probably get it done quite inexpensively with an SEO expert. Or ask around, because you'll be surprised how many people that you might know that they do SEO in their job, but maybe they just don't talk about it because it's not particularly interesting. You might know someone that can help. And my third tip would be, if you have a product and it comes in multiple colorways and you don't have a drop down menu, so each of the individual colorways has an individual URL, all of those product descriptions must be unique. You cannot just copy and paste the product description for all of the same products in different colors. I see this happening a lot, and there's no point in having those pages. You need to have unique copy for every unique URL on your website. So that's a big thing I would recommend.
And why is that? Is it just gets missed? It doesn't get picked up?
Google sees it as duplicate content, so then it's not
Okay.
going to show it on there. It's not going to rank.
And does it have to be completely different, or are you able to just change like 20% of it or 10% of it, and it would show?
Yeah, so I think
You
that's
think?
the tip for number 4. So I would suggest if you have to write duplicate content or you have to create multiple product descriptions for similar pieces, write the first one, add it to a document, and then don't then try and go and rewrite it by changing like 10 or 20 words, because I think that's going to be really difficult. Try and open a new Word document and start it again from scratch. And then my 5th tip would be, if you're struggling with copy and you are doing it yourself and you're not sure how to describe a product, I mean, you've probably spent hours making a product, working on it, but then you'll be surprised how often your mind draws a blank when you actually have to describe it to someone. And if you haven't launched yet and you don't have customer feedback to go on, just ask your friend. Be like, where would you wear this? Or what would you call this bag? Sometimes when I'm really stuck and I'm working on a project, I'll sometimes just ask my husband, who has absolutely no idea about fashion. And he might say like, oh, it looks a bit mushroom coloured. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then it sparks a whole new creative thing. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask people for advice.
And Katie, if people want to get in touch with you and work with you directly and find you, where can they do that?
So you can go to my website, which is katieramsingh.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Katie Ramsingh.
And they will all be in the show notes. So Katie, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.